In a world asking the question, what if the movies that got delayed came out on time and they were different? That's the case in my universe. I'm Steven Shinder, and you're listening to Delayed Replay, Season 5, airing every other Saturday, unless I change my mind. Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Delayed Replay, that podcast where we recap and review movies that got delayed in that other universe but came out on time in our universe. I'm your host, Steven Shinder, back after a little bit of a break. If people tuned into the previous episode, you know why I took a little bit of a break. And this is one more for this year, 2024, and then there'll be another break before Season 6 starts. But yeah, joining me once again for this Star Wars episode, taking place in the new Jedi Order era in canon. It is Camille. How's it going?
Hey, Steven, thanks for having me. As I told you before we started recording, you're the only person who can get me to give my Star Wars opinions on the internet.
No, yeah, this is a safe space here.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. So I guess we could start off with, like, what's your overall relationship with Star Wars?
Oh man. Oh man. I mean, it's funny because it's one of those things where it's like most of the time, like the things that my when I was growing up, my dad tried to get me into, like did not stick. Like 80s music, no thank you. Like all this stuff, no
It's
thank you.
it's
But
always our dads who try to get us into these things, right?
yeah, they're always like, We must pass this on." I was very much raised in a Star Wars, not a Star Trek house. I know that both can coexist, but that was the household I was raised into. But my dad was like, "Oh, you have to see this movie. It's like fantastic." And I was like, Even as a kid, I was skeptical, but then I saw it and I was absolutely blown away. And I was pretty young too, so I basically have grown up my entire life loving and adoring Star Wars. Like, I think one of like the earliest video games I've ever played was Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. And it is honestly probably my favorite video game of all time. Incredible game, incredible universe, like so cool, so incredible. I love it so much. So the rockiness of the the 2010s, I would say, was a little was a little hard because I love the series so much.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I also grew up in a bit of a Star Wars household. My brother was a fan, and my dad, like, didn't, like, get into it until, like, around the time I was born, so he was kind of a fan too. And, growing up with the originals and then seeing the prequels, like, I was super into the prequels as a kid, but as an adult, you realize, okay, there's some things that kind of don't work that well, but people can still like them. And as I grew, like, for me the movies were not enough. It's like I need more. And so, like, getting into the animated stuff and books and comics and video games. And there are certainly some things that I like more than other things. And, like, as you grow older and interact with Star Wars fandom, you start to pick and choose your battles, recognize what things there are where it's like, okay, you can have an honest discussion with people without conflict, and what other threads where it's like, okay, this is a lost cause. I'm not going to engage with this.
That is so true. Yeah, I also like grew up reading a lot of like the expanded universe. Like I read the books, I'd read the Wikipedia pages. I'd play all like the good like did you ever play Star Wars Battlefront 2? The original?
Yeah, me and my brother love that one.
Incredible, incredible video game. So good. So
Yeah,
good. So much fun.
yeah, for sure. And yeah, so I feel like in the Disney era, there have been some things I've liked and some things are kind of middle of the road for me. And I know,
Yeah.
like, lots of people say, oh, Star Wars is much worse after Lucas than when it was with Lucas. But to me, I feel like the ratio is pretty much the same. Like, there's always been stuff
Yeah.
that I've liked more than other things in Star Wars at any given time. Like, it's always been kind of mixed to me, I feel.
I feel whenever whenever I feel like whatever specific aspect or whatever specific media or property like installation you could say, if I feel that things are not being pushed forward, if I feel like, I mean, actually honestly, Force Awakens aside, Force Awakens can spin its wheels all it wants. It's a fun movie. But I feel when the the universe is not being pushed forward, if it's not drawing from other things, if it's not taking in a bunch of different new source materials, and if it's just only focused on like soaking up the universe, when it's not taking from other places, then I feel like we could have done more here. This is feeling a little stagnant. Like we need to keep growing. This entire universe is a hodgepodge of radio serials, Japanese samurai films, and Vietnam War era protest and resistance stuff. Like you have to keep taking from different mediums and films.
Yeah, because when Star Wars gets so caught up in all the cameos and Easter eggs, it can feel like a snake eating its own tail,
Exactly.
basically. Yeah. So, yeah, that's a really good point there. So this movie that we're talking about here, like they say in the opening crawl, like how long it's been since Rise of Skywalker. How long did they say it was after?
Well, so out of year. So for us, it's been like, well, like 5 years, but in the universe, it's been longer. It's been like 15 years, which is like it's a good time skip. I was surprised by like the amount of time that they jumped, but I think it was good, to just like have like it's not as much as in between the original and the sequel series, but it's enough to give us a bit of a fresh start.
Yeah, like Ray and Finn are like mid 30s ish now, I think. Poe is a little bit older than them. So, yeah, I was very surprised it went with 15. I thought maybe they'd go 10 at most, but I guess they really want to push it forward in the timeline, which I mean, I really appreciate because if it was just a couple of years, it's like if it kind of feels like there's not a whole lot you can do there, whereas here you can like mention some developments here and there that have happened in the gap between, and you could fill that gap with some other like non-film stories. And yeah, I think it really opens up a lot of possibilities.
Like The Mandalorian, where it's like kind of situated in between the original and sequel trilogy.
Yeah, what'd you think of the title that they chose for this one?
Um, I thought it was interesting and it ended up being appropriate.
I thought so too. Like, I thought they were gonna go with the title New Jedi Order, and there was like some like that is the name of the era, and there was some discourse about like, oh, if they're titling it after that book series, it should be like that book series. But so I guess maybe that and some other things influenced them to like change it a little bit, where instead it's called Restoration of the Jedi,
Yeah,
which
I thought at first I was like, I don't know, but like I felt like it was thematic because I was like, is this are we clinging on too hard to the original trilogy? But I think honestly, it really like it. No, it's a continuation. It's the format of this series, and I think it really does a good job.
yeah. And granted, it is a similar abbreviation as what Return of the Jedi has, but I do really appreciate how it feels like the way they're restoring the orders by cleansing it, making it not as, strict and like Jedi shaming each other of being emotional as like the prequel era was, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah,
what
definitely.
do you think of this Jedi Order here?
Yeah, it was nice. I mean, like, is it's also been interesting. The thing I've liked talking to friends about is like the prequel series, like the political intrigue is not translated well, but it is really interesting because if you look at it, like where we begin the prequel series, like the Jedi have already lost before anything happens. There is no move that they can really make where Palpatine's not going to win because he's already set things up like 20 years in advance. Um, so and especially because he knows how to target this Jedi Order. And I think Knights of the Old Republic gives an interesting contrast too. So basically, the two eras that we've really seen of the Jedi are either Knights of the Old Republic style, and I know it's not technically canon anymore, but we're gonna treat it as canon because it's canon to me. You have the Jedi Order being actively involved, and like you see it too in like the Acolyte, uh, the Order being involved, going out proactive or sorry, that's the prequel series, is that they're going out, they're proactive. Knights of the Republic is they don't want to get involved with wars, they're trying to abstain. And then you have the members of the Order going, well, no, like the universe is currently at war with itself. We gotta go. We gotta go help people. Um, so you have those two eras of the Jedi of being so rigid and stubborn and conformist in both sides of clinging, of not being really flexible or open. So to have this new Jedi Order, to especially of like the fact that the kids are taken so young usually, um, and taken away from their families. So I think it's interesting that this, especially since they're still rebuilding, that it's been less of taking away and more of being a bit more integrated with the different worlds. It's been a bit of mix of both and having older people as well, not just younglings, because both Rey and Finn were pretty old when they discovered that they were force sensitive and became Jedi. So have it be a bit more open has been really interesting.
Yeah, and I really like how in this opening sequence, after the crawl, um, we see Rey and Finn's like Jedi ships like flying super fast, and it's like, oh, what's going on here? And they land on this planet, and then you think it's gonna be like a battle or something, but instead you see them like knocking on a family's door, and then we get into this like they're having a conversation with these parents about their force sensitive kid. It's kind of like the Charles Xavier thing, but without the Charles Xavier sometimes seems like very guarded and secretive. It's like, oh, we'd like to teach your child how to hone their skills, and so when they go to the Jedi temple, like the parents go with them to sort of like see and supervise, and it feels really open. Like the a force sensitive kid is welcome to keep studying there, but if they feel like they need to, they'd rather wait like until they're a bit older, then they have that option as well. So I thought that was a really neat way of reintroducing what the Jedi are at this point.
Yeah, because it needs to be a bit more malleable. I think there's like an interesting aspect that probably happened between the original and the sequel series as well, but that we just didn't see as much because all the Jedi were gone by the time we got to the sequels. Of seeing like, hey, like Jedi are basically, especially around the time of the Empire, that Jedi are basically like this myth. They're this old dead religion. To see how, um, and then with Luke's era of Jedi, it seemed very small, and they're all unfortunately gone pretty quickly. So to have the order be bigger now, and also to see people's reactions to having this be some sort of long, like this dead religion, this kind of like mythical thing. It's kind of people are like, oh yeah, we're like knights, like we are like knights now, and we're just gonna go be knights. And it's like, what? You can still be a knight? That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, and with Luke, like one of the thorns in people's side was like they kind of wish that he had been the one to bring the Jedi Order back, and we got that in the old EU, and I get that they want to try something different with like the new movies, but it does kind of feel like they try to put an olive branch in this movie by showing that okay, like they still teach like these hollow recording lessons of like Luke giving some instructions of like lightsaber training and the Force and stuff. So they refer to some of those, and so you see like a bit of a younger Luke in those recordings, which thankfully they got like a different actor this time instead of like de-aging his face. It's like one of the doubles. They just didn't put a CGI face on him in these.
Yeah, because like the guy looks like Luke Campbell, just like let him speak. Yeah, I mean, I really liked that and I really appreciated it because sometimes like I mean we've definitely seen where Disney Star Wars has kind of bent over backwards for fans, and so I felt this was an olive branch that makes sense because of course Luke would make these recordings. Of course he would want to go on and have some sort of reference because you can't always rely on the Force Ghost to teach an entire Jedi Order, you know?
Right. Yeah, and like they have these some of these like older, the sacred texts, that Rey had salvaged, and we get to see like these classroom settings where it's like, so the Jedi of this time period were taught this, but today, we look back on that and this is what we do now, and all these other like updates and things where like Jedi of this time are actually allowed to have romantic relationships, which feels healthier for them.
Yeah, it's definitely a big change, and I think that's it's a change that's always been needed. I think that there's always been like this kind of emphasis on, oh no, no romantic relationships at all. It's immediately going to lead to the dark side. I mean, you saw like the downfall with Anakin of having such a focus on forbidding romantic attachments. Like they're not all humans, but they're all beings. Like things will happen. Like there has to be like we've been talking about. There's a bit more of a balance that the Jedi Order has always been really rigid in everything, and that it's been nice to see in this new Jedi Order that there's a bit more consideration and balance.
Yeah, definitely. And I like the variety of, we get some alien Jedi students as well as human Jedi students. Like, I kind of get bored when there are so many humans, so I really appreciate that there's like a lot of aliens here as well.
Yeah, I was surprised to have like an alien like main character. Like I was not expecting like a rodent to be like one of the like major like supporting characters, but I very very cute, very charming. And so that was nice to have a bit more of, especially because I feel like a lot of times aliens in Star Wars are just kind of like not treated as like a full character. Like you're not really able to hear or understand their full thoughts. Like because like Chewbacca, like most of the stuff was not translated, so it's nice to have subtitles and he also spoke Galactic Basic to be able to have a bit more of a leading alien figure.
Yeah, like when I think of Rhodians, the first thing that comes to mind is Greedo. And he's like such a silly character, I guess, like the way he's just taken down so easily. But yeah, that's an interesting thing how like his dialogue was translated was had like subtitles in A New Hope, and yet we never got subtitles for Chewbacca. It's like wow, like, Star Wars really picks and chooses who it wants to translate, I guess.
That was a good point.
Yeah. But yeah, this Rhodian Jedi student like is a bit comic relief, but also has some skills and is like trying to do well with his force powers. And he gets frustrated when he's like trying to lift as many rocks as he can with the force, and when he's like really down on himself. Finn gives him this like really nice, pep talk, trying to, lift his spirits.
It's so nice to like see like I obviously Finn was going through a lot in the sequel series, and so it was definitely it was nice to see him a bit more mature, a bit more sure of himself, and a bit more of a mentor role. I think that was something a lot of people, including myself, were hoping that he would have a bit more of a leadership role at the end of in Rise of Skywalker and kind of unite the the lead like a stormtrooper rebellion. So since we can't get that, it's nice to see him grow into his leadership abilities and mentorship abilities.
Yeah, I do like how there is a moment in this where, Janna appears, another former stormtrooper who is in Rise of Skywalker, and she mentions that Finn was the reason that she and her friends decided to defect. So it's really surprising that they didn't include that line in Rise of Skywalker. It would have at least added a bit, if they weren't gonna go full Stormtrooper rebellion. So,
You
I mean,
think?
better late than never, I guess.
You know, at this point, I'll take it. Like, I mean, we're both comic book fans. We're both willing to take a retcon if it gets us rid of the new 52. Of
Yeah,
course.
I mean, I like New 52 Batman and some of Batgirl. I know you and I were like both down on like the Batgirl of Burnside storyline and
Oh my gosh,
how it felt
yes.
like it was appealing to like the younger internet crowd or whatever. But yeah, like DC with all its retcons, it's like I'm really used to it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but this was one that I liked here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I thought it was well done and well handled.
Yeah, so what'd you think of the relationships, like the updates that we get on how, the sequel trio plus Rose and all these other characters, how they are with each other?
Yeah, I mean, it made sense that Ray and Finn were so close, both leading the order together. Um, I liked that like they did end up having a relationship, but then it seems like it unfortunately didn't work out. And so, but they're still friends and they're still leading this order together. There's still like a lot of love there between them and shows that they can still have a great friendship too. Um, and it was nice to that they seemed all more in touch than I was expecting. Like especially Rose, I thought would be a bit more of Drifter, but I love Kelly Marie Tran, so very happy to have her back. It was cool to see her a bit more involved with the politics. It was she provided like a good like conduit for the politics. It also was nice to have like a Republic politics written well because like I've said before, there's definitely some great ideas in the sequels, but in the prequels, but were not the best executed. So it was nice to have that. What did you think?
Yeah, I really liked how active she was in the politics of stuff because the government officials are like kind of wary of like this new threat that's rising, and there are like some pockets here and there of people who are like, oh, we need to turn the Jedi into an army again, and Rose is like, well, the Jedi can help us as they can, but we can't repeat the mistakes of the past where everything is militarized and we're sending everything to war. Like, let's find out how big this threat is first. And so that kind of starts the mystery of like reintroducing us to this era and like what this new threat is, like whether
Yeah, what did
new
you think?
or old.
What did you think of the new of the villains?
It's kind of strange how they don't think the Force should be used at all. Like they think that the Force is something that is not meant to be understood, and that by wielding it, like it's kind of using it. Like I think it kind of reminded me of like some of the High Republic era stuff, like some of the thoughts about the Force there. But yeah, you have these people who don't think that the Force should be utilized and kind of see it as cheating when it comes to combat and stuff. So I kind of had mixed feelings about some of it, but yeah, I don't know. What did you think about that whole thing?
Yeah, well, I was being like, yes, we have a Knights of the Old Republic 2 fan has infiltrated the Star Wars offices as they should. Like when I watched, it was funny watching the Acolyte. And I was like, oh, we've gotten old enough that now we have a Knights of the Old Republic fan running the show here. I immediately was clocking stuff. Uh, but it was interesting because I feel like both games, and especially the second bring really interesting questions and ideas forward, especially this idea of, hey, like, what do we think about the Force? It's supposed to be about this balance, but the way it's being utilized by people, it has caused so much chaos and war in this universe. Um, Especially the way it has, like, favored the Skywalker family who has gone through some chaos. I understand why there would be villains be like, let's just get rid of it. And so I think it did lead to really interesting philosophical questions. And so we had some really cool, great fights, especially because these villains do know how to kind of negate the Force. So, especially when we're in this new Jedi Order and we have Finn and Rey who have spent a decade now kind of like relying on their Jedi abilities to have to, it was great to see them use them, but also to have to see them get creative and go kind of back to their basics was very cool and made some very cool fight choreography.
Yeah, I agree. Even though some of those ideas of like these people's perspectives on the Force, like even if they're not new to Star Wars, they're new to the general audience because not everyone has like read or played everything else. And people do look back on things in history and try to do things a different way. So I was fine with them doing it here and how this group of people they call themselves the centripetal tendrils. What did you think of that name?
I thought it was cool. I think it's very like Star Wars-y of like having like a dramatic name. I mean, if you look at a lot of the naming of different things in Star Wars, it's a lot of like high fantasy, serial, Western sort of thing. So I thought it was fun to bring in. It felt like a bit more of like a fantasy element they're pulling in.
Their whole thing is, it's very much based on fear, right? Because they're aware that like the Emperor and Vader and stuff like that were able to use the Force. They see this new Jedi Order rising and kind of fear something else, like something similar could happen. I mean, kind of like what happened with Kylo Ren, and so that's why this new, I guess, organization, I guess you'd call it, has some members who seem like they think they're doing the right thing, but part of something that's going about it in a harmful way. And there are also like some members of this thing where it's like, yeah, they clearly want to harm some people. Um, and you mentioned like the fantasy-ness of it. So the way that this group tries to negate the Force is they've created a like this crystal powered machine that they would use to target certain locations, and it would put something in the air that would like make it difficult for people to connect to the Force.
Yeah, kind of like a Force EMT. I liked it. I thought it had like a bit more basis in canon and made more sense than like I felt like the holocron reliance in the sequel series, especially at the end, was a little confusing, a little like too focused on all the answers are in the past. So I thought that this was an interesting thing that was discovered through like going through like hyperspace routes and just like all of the knowledge that's been built up from the Empire and then First Order, and then the Republic. So I thought it was a good use to show how this conflict has allowed people to kind of study the Jedi and the Force a little bit.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned the like speaking of the holocron, like something that this group did is that they hired like this cyborg hacker type character who was able to like hack into the holocrons of the new Jedi Order, so they're able to figure out the locations of where some of the more force sensitive beings are across the galaxy. And so that's kind of how they're choosing their targets. And yeah, that whole hacking thing, it feels like a very real fear in like here on Earth. So it's interesting how
Yeah.
they integrated that whole thing.
Yeah, that was very cool. She was really cool. It was also like a fun, like kind of like it felt kind of like space film noir energy of like kind of like like slinking around in the shadows, but like using like tech, like kind of like a combination of like kind of like a cyberpunky film noir. So I had a fun time with that.
Yeah, I listened to this other podcast called How Star Wars Is It, where they rate things on a scale from 1 to 10 based on how Star Wars they feel, and it is more often than not stuff outside of Star Wars, like various random movies and stuff. And they say that Star Wars has a lot of sneaking around, so that feels very much in the Star Wars DNA here.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, I think it gets lost in the dialogue of it, but I think the Attack of the Clones has a lot of there's like a lot of it's convoluted, but there's a lot of fun espionage going on in the beginning where they're trying to figure out what's happening.
Yeah, what's so convoluted about a Sith Lord hiring a Sith Lord, hiring a bounty hunter, hiring another bounty hunter, sending a droid to send like insect things to assassinate a senator?
Totally makes sense. Also just somehow leads to finding out about a clone army. Like, definitely not a convoluted plan whatsoever.
Right. But yeah, I do like how the stuff here, even though there's a lot going on, it feels very clear like what's going on and what people's motivations are. Um, and so I do appreciate that. And you also see, the acting, I gotta give it up to, Daisy Ridley, for example, when she expresses her anger over the fact that, this cyberpunk hacker person like has basically given away the safety of these other Force users, some of which are kids, and
Yeah.
like there's a lot of responsibility there, with leading the Jedi Order and trying to make sure that everyone is safe and not a target.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that like a lot of the time the charm like it's there's a lot of charm and fun in Star Wars that like it was I was like, oh wait, this is a genuinely really good performance and it's a well written monologue that like this is like Star Wars can be this. Like it is nice to see Star Wars reach these kind of heights. And honestly, I was surprised that John Boyega came back. Like he had to go through a lot. He like suffered a lot and went through a lot of unfair things and unfair reactions. I would have understood if he wanted to turn his back completely on the series, but I think he knew that the writing and directing was going to be really strong. And so it's nice to get see him given the material that he deserves. And I think he just absolutely crushed it. And so it was so nice to see them, to see their chemistry together, and also to see them get the kind of storylines that both of them have deserved for so long.
Yeah, like it really just gives people like what they were wanting. Like, with the Force Awakens marketing, it was a cool reveal that, oh, Rey is force sensitive this whole time, but to make the marketing like Finn is front and center and then the next movies don't give him as much focus. Like I feel like there would have been less controversy with those other movies if like during those missions like he had been like if they got cornered and then all of a sudden Finn holds out his hand and it shows that he can use the force. Like I think some of the controversies could have been quelled if even if they had just thrown something like that in.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just be blunt here. Like, Disney should have defended him against the
Yeah.
racist fans, and they should have stuck with. And he was brought on to be a leading character, and they should have continued to give him leading man things.
Yeah, like there have been times where they haven't done enough to defend their actors against racism, even recently,
Yup.
and there should be more like, coming to their aid and like really, um, going against the fans who are racist. I mean, Ewan McGregor even talked down to the racist fans around the time of the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. So,
Yeah, and it sucks that it was we need that. Why is that not all the time? So it was nice to see. Especially I was when they announced this movie, I was like, oh, I don't know what's gonna happen fan wise, but they had a very strong plan, and it was nice to see them over and over again unequivocally defend, support, and celebrate John Boyega and the other actors of color that were in this movie. And I was like, this is, I don't know why it took us this long to have this happen, but this is what we need. This is what the fandom needs.
yeah, and I like that they had, there's also diversity not just in the order but also in the like squadrons like Rogue Squadron for example. We see Poe leading them when they're kind of trying to get intel on the centripetal tendrils and then knowing what they're up against and then coming back and telling the others like what to expect. So I like how everyone here feels like they have a role to play. I guess R2 and 3PO are more like cameos in this movie, and Chewbacca as well. But I do like that they're at least somewhere in the mix. I do appreciate that we're getting more focus on like the newer and younger characters.
It was also just nice. Like I feel
I
like
keep saying this, but it's just nice to like have like the promise of the prequels of like political intrigue and to have it actually be good. Because the Jedi are such an interesting concept and they're such an interesting position of they're like monk space cops in a way. They work they work with, especially in the prequel series, they work with the Republic. They're upkeeping the peace, but they're also this religious order. So that leads to a lot of conflict and politics and intrigue and drama. And I think sometimes it got a little lost in the dialogue in the prequels as much as I have a fondness for them. So it was nice to see
Yeah.
that those kind of ideas really be executed here.
Yeah. And Ray, Finn, like they lead a Jedi task force to what they figure out is like the centripetal tendrils next target. Like they go to this one planet where it seems like a very pine cone heavy planet. Like this is an interesting design for this, but there's always got to be like some weird like terrain or I guess flora or whatever. But yeah, they go to this planet that's been targeted. The weapon has been used on it, and so they try to find like these force sensitive um, youngsters, and when they reach them, they're like, I can't feel the force anymore. And you really feel for them because, they dreamed of someday being able to utilize that power and, being stuck here. It's like, I don't know, you really feel for them. Especially when Ray and Finn kind of know what it's like growing up without knowing how to use the Force for so many years. So to be in that position, it really hit hard for them, I think.
yeah, it was interesting too because like it was
A swap, right? Like these kids grew up knowing that they had this connection to the Force and that obviously they couldn't like wield it to a Jedi level, but having that kind of like second nature use of the Force, where for Finn and Rey it took them some time, so to have that kind of swath of having suddenly having being cut off from that artificially was really interesting. I thought it was like a good perspective and allowed for like some interesting character moments. Also, I thought the planet design was cool because it was interesting the atmosphere of the planet, maybe a little Dune 2 inspired, but the the atmosphere was yellow. I feel like most Star Wars planets you usually have like a blue sky, so it was interesting to have like kind of a yellow sky and see. I think the cinematographers had a fun time playing with how that would reflect on clothing and people and like the lighting and everything. So that was really cool.
Yeah, they definitely did. And something that's also an effect of, cutting people off from the Force is that not only does it keep Force wielders from being able to like force push and pull or whatever, but the thing is the Force flows in all life, and it can be like this very spiritual thing that gives people a faith, that gives them hope. And so when a location is cut off from the Force, it also makes, the normal people, like the normies or whatever, feel like they are unsure of everything and they have less hope, they have more anxiety. So it's not just the Force wielders that this is affecting, and this is something that the centripetal tendrils don't realize right away, but kind of realize as they go along. And so there's a bit of this internal debate thing going on.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I think a lot of the times we only see how the
Force works for the Force users because it's like the flashy things, and I think there's always been that implication there that's not really been fully explored of that like the Force, well, maybe it's only certain people can use it, but it is important for everyone. So to try to cut off that connection with the Force does end up harming people.
Yeah. And it's a very, I guess, a sobering moment for the Rhodian student character. He's been joking around and stuff, but he's seeing these things firsthand that are happening and realizing that it's not all fun and games. I'm trying to remember what his name was. I think it's oh, what was it?
it's tough.
Sorry?
It's tough. I can't remember his like last name, but it's
His first name's Tuv.
Oh yeah, it was tough. Yeah. Yeah, it almost sounds like tough, but it's like a weird space spelling. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Tuv is sort of going through his own coming of age thing, and there's also like this side thing where he has a crush on someone else in the order. So I guess they can't completely like remove love stories from Star Wars.
I mean,
So
it's a
it's
part of Star Wars. Like that's what it is. It's like it's a fantasy, it's a radio drama. Like there it's so much about emotion and connection that like it was nice to have a bit more of an explicit. I think the sequel series kind of dance around romantic relationships, except oh my God, at the can you
yeah.
tell I don't love Raylo? That it was nice to have it be a bit more explicitly put and bare from the bat, and I thought that it really helped tie into the themes of and the messages of the movie.
Yeah, there's even this little date that happens at one point in the movie where but it's like lunch with macaroons, and it's like, oh, okay, I guess I could resist putting a Mandalorian reference in there with the macaroons. But yeah, like he's going through his own journey, and it's really wild because like I didn't expect that like I'd be super invested in a Rhodian of all types of characters. I mean, I know we've gotten more benevolent Rhodians, like in the Clone Wars, they fleshed out that senator, but yeah, we've really come a long way since the first movie.
just gonna give a hot take that's unrelated, but if I'm spouting out Star Wars
Opinions, I'll give my hot take.
Okay.
Um, I loved the art direction and style of the original Clone Wars series. I'm sure you probably remember it's
Oh,
like more 2D and stylized.
yeah, the Gendy Tartakovsky series.
Yes, yes, incredible. but I can't get into the 3D like afterwards. I've actually haven't really seen anything that's like any of the 3D. I'm just like I can't do it. Go back to the cool art style. I can't do this art style. Like Clone Wars fans come for my head or tell me that I should give it a chance. But the original series art style is so incredible.
No, yeah, I love both series. The style of the original definitely influenced the 3D one. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like in 2008, everyone was so down on the new series just because it was 3D, and now it's like lauded as one of the best things in Star Wars. So it's kind of funny how anti 3D animation were people were in like the late 2000s for some reason. I don't know.
So you're saying I should give it a chance?
Yeah. Well, if you want, I mean, there's like some of my favorite storylines in all of Star Wars are in that show, but I also recognize that there is like so much Star Wars, and each person at this point just kind of has to pick and choose what are they invested in, what interests them the most, type thing. Because, as much as people recommend a viewing order, like this is how you should get into everything, at the end of the day, I think if something grabs your attention and you watch it and it makes you want to watch all these other things, then it's a good entry point regardless of where it is in the chronology.
So true.
Yeah. Um so there are these, I guess, kind of like little skirmishes that happen in all these different locations. The Jedi are trying not to be all out war, so there is like some sneaking around that goes on so that they can, peacefully um counteract the centripetal tendrils. It's like that scene in the 2D Clone Wars where Anakin and Obi-Wan are sneaking around in a sewer, and Anakin wants to like fight with a lightsaber, and Obi-Wan's like, "Wait, there are more subtle ways to do this," and Anakin's like, "That's no fun." But yeah, basically similar idea there.
Yeah, and then I think the couple
Couple of fight scenes that do happen honestly did kind of remind me of the Acolyte of the especially the very good I think where they were in a foresty planet. I can't remember what the planet was. Was it Chewbacca's? Was it Kashyyyk? I don't know. It wasn't Kashyyyk. Um, but a similar kind of creative use of negating the Force, and that it was the armor that the stranger had. And this not
Yeah,
there was
like
some
the
thoughts that
cortosis armor.
yeah, yeah, but a bit more manipulation with their crystal. So I thought there was a lot of fun with that, and kind of like they've studied on the Jedi and Sith so much, so they know how to short circuit like the lightsabers and stuff. And so that kind of fun, kind of like, ooh, this is kind of like a secret. The centripetal tendrils, centripetal tendrils of wanting to make sure they're not discovered, but still having this kind of like fight sequence. So there's a lot of tension and a lot of fun.
Yeah, like with the Acolyte, there were some structural things that I thought I kind of had issues with, but the choreography overall I thought was good. So I thought it was cool how they carried that into this film, like making it feel like it's all part of the same world and whatnot.
Yeah, I definitely saw one, at least one. There was the one action shot that had a little bit of the wuxia influence that the Acolyte had. And I was like, yes, bring this back.
Yeah.
More, let's draw from more cool sources.
Yeah, faster, more intense, as George Lucas would say.
Sorry.
Right. Um, and yeah, we do get a confrontation between, Rey and Finn come face to face with the leader of the centripetal tendril. Or what'd you think of like the leader here and how that went down?
I thought the fight was cool. I think
I'm hoping this will maybe be fixed in the or like added to in the other movies. But you know Star Wars villains, they're not usually given a lot of fleshing out, or it takes some time to flesh them out. So I felt like I wanted a bit more on their backstory and why they're like we got a bit of a sense from the conversations, but I would like a little bit more meat on the bone on the villains, you know?
Yeah, it almost felt like when James Bond meets a Bond villain, like in one of the early films, and it kind of feels one-dimensional in some aspects.
Hmm.
Like I do appreciate some of the things they fixed for this film compared to, some of the past stuff. But yeah, the villain problem, I feel like that's something that just always persists now and then, even in like superhero stuff. Like it's always gonna like fluctuate. There will be some villains who are super well written and some villains who are kind of just a means to an end for whatever the conflict is that they need for the story. So I do hope that we at least get some like I know that things should be in the movie ideally, but hopefully like some future like comics, novels, material that fleshes out the villains here a bit more.
Definitely. I mean, Star Wars is never lacking
And additional resources. So I think we'll definitely get a bit of that before the rest of the movies.
Right. And I thought it was cool how this fight is, it's on this part of space cruiser like this huge space cruiser that like kind of separates from it, and so they're fighting on this like spinning disc thing that's sort of floating in space, but of course like also like it has this bubble around it to keep the oxygen in and stuff. But I thought that was a cool visual, and having that disc like go into an asteroid field, so it adds a bit more tension to that. What'd you think of this sequence here?
stunning. I thought it really felt
Up on a lot of things because we see like space battles in Star Wars and we see like planetary battles, but it feels like usually in a space battle they're like more in a spaceship, so to have this kind of danger of like what happens if like something happens structurally to the bubble, like they're fighting, but they're also trying to make sure that they're not going to like lose all of their oxygen because they don't have they're fighting people who can negate the force, so they can't like create like a force bubble if that's even possible to for oxygen. So I thought it was a very visually striking image to see them like against this backdrop of stars and having this very cool fight and having it be spinning. I think it required a lot of very intense, groundbreaking technology that was very cool to see. I mean, Star Wars has always been about that, right? Sometimes for the better and sometimes the for the sake of the technology. Um, so it was nice to see it be really well utilized here.
Yeah, and it also wouldn't be a Star Wars movie without some sort of creature. I do like that it's not a space slug like the one in Empire, but what you think of this creature that appears in the asteroid field that kind of gets in the way?
it was cool. It was funky. I could tell they
Went and did a research trip on it. I think they talked about how they've been researching like potential like space creatures. And so I thought like the shape was really interesting. Like usually for like space, I would expect a bit more of a blob sort of thing, but it was a little more refined, a little more aerodynamic, and like pretty sick to have like a creature that can breathe in space, you know?
Yeah, it definitely felt like the creature could like stretch itself out and be very flexible and move through different narrow spaces. So that feels like a huge threat if encountered like in real life. And it's like, whoa, how do you even deal with this thing?
yeah.
Yeah, but what'd you think of the way that this fight ended?
I thought it was uh good. I think honestly, like The
the anti-force, like it was kind of interesting because they kind of got a win. Obviously, thankfully, Ray and Finn are still alive, and this they lost like I think at least one person on the task force, which was hard. But they got a bit of a win by that. But I think that it was a bit more of a more narrow win and a bit more of a narrow escape. So I thought it was interesting because usually it's a bit more of a decisive win uh, for the first movie in like a Star Wars trilogy. So I thought this uh, kind of overturned the playing field a bit, and so it'll be interesting to see how this power struggle continues. I think it was they kind of won the physical fight, but I think that this kind of planted maybe like a seed of doubt of their mission and what they're doing. And so I think it's going to lead to a lot of interesting, like, fracturing, maybe.
Yeah, because like the way that this film is like the way it's structured and edited is kind of weird. I guess similar to A New Hope, where it feels like it could stand on its own, but if it's a huge success, it could lead to more installments in this conflict. So, yeah, because like they had this win against the leader, but the leader's not the only part of this organization. You know, they have their own structure and stuff. Tuv does learn from this experience, and I forgot to mention like Tamiri Black, Broom Boy, was also in this, so he got to like use a lightsaber, and in the end, he even got to use a broom to like take down one of their enemies, which I thought was a fun thing to do. Um,
oh, okay, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and you have the Force Collector
Mhm.
card Nux in at the temple, but yeah, like this was definitely a victory for them, at least for the present moment. But in Star Wars, you know, it's a franchise that goes on forever, so whatever, no matter what medium, there's always going to be a way to continue more of these stories, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, was there anything else you want to touch on, or did you want to go into final thoughts?
Mm, nothing in particular, I will say. I mean, Star Wars.
Like the sound design is going to be incredible. Like I said, I really liked the choreography and the I thought the writing was a lot stronger than I was worried about. And I thought the directing was really strong too.
Yeah. Oh, I also like that they got like the music for this. They got Alexander Desplat, who I think was originally gonna do the music for Rogue One, but I thought the themes that he did for this one felt very Star Warsy, but also very experimental in some places. Like there's that weird electric sounding theme during the asteroid sequence. So yeah, I thought his music was pretty cool in this.
Yeah, I thought it was really good. I mean, it's obviously it's hard when you're stacking yourself up against John.
John Williams, I thought it was a good new direction to take the series in.
Yeah, for sure. So, final thoughts. What are your final thoughts on this film, Star Wars Restoration of the Jedi? And what's your score out of 10 and unit of measurement for that score?
Okay, I this movie was a lot better than
I
I.
was worried about. It was not fun to listen to various fandom opinions on this movie before this came out, but
Right.
I think they really proved everyone wrong, and it was nice to like every time I watch Star Wars and I get to be excited about Star Wars is a good time. Like it's kind of like a relief. I mean, I'm sure you feel the same way. I know everyone who grew up on Star Wars feels the same way that like when you watch good Star Wars, you feel like a kid again. There's just this beautiful sense of wonder and adventure, and I really felt that in this, even with a more sophisticated like political intrigue plot. So I really enjoyed it. I will give it a I'm like debating between an 8.5 and a 9 because there's still like a couple things. But I really liked it and I will do it. I'm laughing because I do the normal do I do like credits or do I do like midichlorian?
Yeah, I mean, whichever one works, yeah.
I'll do midichlorians. I haven't pissed off enough people yet, so that's what I'll go with.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, you do have that one little scene in this movie where you have a couple students arguing about midichlorians. And you even have a couple students arguing, like, wait, when was Mundi born? And it's like, oh, that's poking fun at the fans who made such a huge deal out of nothing during the Acolyte with Mundi's age.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
What
Um,
do you think?
Yeah, I thought this was pretty solid. Um, there were some things where it felt like it was kind of leaned into some tropiness, but I do
Mhm.
feel like it, progressed the timeline in a new way. Like we're not fighting Darksiders in this, and it does make some interesting food for thought of, how would people react if there were people who can tap into the Force and want to avoid more future conflicts. And so I do appreciate those questions. So I think I'd give this one 8.25 out of 10 um, macaroons. Yeah, so I think it's solid. And there's definitely room for more expansion in the Star Wars franchise. So this does get me excited going forward, but I also know that even having enjoyed this, I should probably temper my expectations and think, okay, not every Star Wars thing is going to be great, you know?
Well, I think they actually planned this one out this time. I think I learned from the sequel series that you have to have a plan in advance. So I think there is a plan if things go well. So
Yeah,
that makes me a little
because
more optimistic.
yeah, because um like trying to tell a Star Wars story, making it up as you go along, like it can work, but if it's super obvious that it's as they're going along, like it's really tough to buy into, you know?
You have to have an overarching theme and kind of like overarching theme and question of what you want this Star Wars story to be about and what you're trying to say. And so it's helpful to know what you're going for.
Yeah, like improv here and there is fine if it works, but if the whole thing feels like improvised in like strange directions and yeah. So
Yeah, definitely agree on that one.
all right. So, yeah, I guess that'll do it. Thanks for joining me for this episode, Camille. Do you have anything you'd like to plug or even just like a show or movie you want to recommend to people?
Thank you. Yeah. Should recommend the Acolyte.
All right, sure.
Um, oh, honestly, if you haven't played Knights of the Old Republic, I have to. If you're listening and you haven't played it, I have to recommend it. It's a really great game. And honestly, the other thing I kept thinking about when watching this movie is I really loved Jedi Academy, Jedi Knight Jedi Academy. Did you play that game?
Yeah, I've played the first few games in that series. So there's Dark Forces, Dark Forces 2, Jedi Knight, um, Jedi Knight Mysteries of the Sith. So I've completed those three, and then I played the beginning of Jedi Knight, Jedi Outcast, and got stuck. And that was years and years ago. So I only played the beginning of that one. Like that's the furthest I got, and then I never got around to playing Jedi Academy. But
Oh, it's
yeah.
very fun. I feel like it's kind of like the controls for the
They
lightsaber.
were like kind of like I would say like the loosest, if that makes sense. It's like you're kind of like waving it around, but it's a very fun story. Luke, it's like you're a student at Luke's Jedi Academy. You get to play, you have the option as of playing a bunch of different alien characters or just like a human character.
Oh, nice.
And it's just like a fun, like the story isn't gonna knock your socks off, but there's the missions and the gameplay is really fun. So I'd recommend it.
Okay, nice. So everyone check that out, and I'll include my plugs in the edit. But without further delay, have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
All right, and I know we didn't mention any planet names, but that's because they're not said out loud in the movie, but I guess they're gonna
show them in the visual guide or whatever when it comes out in the new year. So I guess some things never change, you know? And I think at one point when we were talking about holocrons, might have been referring to wayfinders, but yeah, when thinking back to previous movies like Rise of Skywalker. But yeah, this is a really fun Star Wars discussion. I realized that this wasn't an overtly holiday-ish episode, but Star Wars, I feel, is kind of inherently holiday feely, especially with the December releases, you know? So, yeah, thanks again to Camille for being on this episode. And you can find me on my socials listed in the description, whether it be at Steven Shinder or Steven Shinder Storytelling, or you can find me on Letterboxd, Goodreads, all that stuff. StevenShinder.com for info on my novels. Really gotta get back into the creative juices there. It's just been it's been a time. I'll just say that, I guess, but really gotta get back into that. And you can email Delayed Replay Podcast via delayedreplaypodcast@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts on Jedi temples. We saw multiple here. I guess the one on Coruscant is kind of a museum, but they still kind of use it. And there's the place where Luke put his temple, which they restored. So, yeah. What's your favorite Jedi temple, I guess? And yeah, I think that's pretty much it for me. And then you'll hear from my other self, kind of giving an update on some stuff he's been watching. So without further delay, here's my other self. Hey everyone, much like my Delayed Replay Universe counterpart, I took a break, and yeah, I guess I'm catching you up now on what's been going on. Over on my YouTube channel, Steven Shinder Reviews in video form, I've gotten back into making some videos after having a few weeks taking a break from all that. So on there, I have a review of Wicked. It's an incredible film, relevant to current times, I guess you could say, and the music is great. They really did it justice. It makes sense that it's two films instead of just the one. I've also reviewed other things on there like Lord of the Rings, the War of the Rohirrim. I thought it was fine. I thought it was fine for what it was, but it didn't break a whole lot of new ground or whatnot. But yeah, I feel like there could have been a bit more effort, but I thought it was fine for what it was, and I'm curious what future Rings stuff will be, since this one was pretty much made just to maintain the film rights. So yeah, with Hunt for Gollum, I think that should really be animated if they're not going to recast, because I don't like when they do the whole de-aging thing. So yeah, I don't know, I guess we'll see with all that. I also finished the final season of The Dragon Prince over on Netflix, so that's another animated fantasy series, and I thought it was a pretty good final season, but they did sort of leave things open. Weirdly made it seem like there could be more Dragon Prince with a time skip, but I don't know if that's in the cards. It's kind of weird that they ended it like that. But also on Netflix, I finished watching Arcane. Kind of weird that it was only 2 seasons, but it told a full story and interesting world, and I really loved the emotional scenes that felt like music videos. I thought it was a really good show, that one. Also on my channel, I haven't reviewed all these things on my channel. There are select things I kind of pick and choose, but over on my channel, I also recently reviewed the Doctor Who Christmas special, Joy to the World. I thought that was fun, and I explain why in the video. And I've also been reviewing Star Wars Skeleton Crew, so, bringing it back to Star Wars here. I've really been enjoying that one. It's been a fun show. I think 3 more episodes left. We're 5 in, there's 3 more. And I've really been enjoying this journey with this show. It doesn't feel too reliant on nostalgia, and it also doesn't focus too much on fighting against Darksiders. So I thought it was really refreshing. And there are these occasionally, there might be a couple little things that bother people, and it's very stupid that bothers them, but by and large, I don't see a whole lot of Skeleton Crew discussion on my socials, so I don't know what the viewership is like. At this point, I'm kind of expecting it'll only be 1 season, but if so, I think they've they have a complete story for this 1 season at least, so I'm a bit hopeful for that. But if they ever do make another one with a time skip or something, I'd be down for it. I've also been trying to catch up on Marvel's What If, and I only saw this season 3 premiere. I was gonna try to watch more the rest of it that's out before doing this recording here, but I figured, I gotta get this done. But from what I saw, the season 3 premiere was really good. I really loved the focus on Sam, Monica, and Bruce. It was a little bit confusing in the opening scene, but it makes sense by the end. The whole mecha and meta angle, I guess you could say. And it was a really great jam-packed episode. And I hope I enjoy the rest of this season, which apparently is also the final season. Really weird. Again, really weird ending it with season 3. And releasing it around the holidays. I don't know how well it did around the holidays last time, but yeah, I don't know. It feels like What If is such a concept that could be mined for a lot of stuff, so it's strange that it's not this long ongoing thing. So yeah, I don't know. And I've also been watching Creature Commandos, the new animated series that's part of the new DCU. And it's interesting how it incorporates threads from the DCEU, specifically pretty much just the events of the Suicide Squad. There's a character who dies there, and that's acknowledged in the first episode. And we've heard James Gunn say that Peacemaker Season 1 can fit if you just don't think about the Justice League cameo. And yeah, I feel like beforehand people were making such a huge deal and arguing about, it's gonna be so confusing, but I don't think it's really that confusing, what's in the new universe and what is not. It's pretty much just like reading comics. You figure it out as you go, oh, so I guess this is part of this. So yeah. And I mean, even with Star Wars, when after the Legends announcement and new stories were coming out, we figured that certain events may have happened or may have happened differently. So yeah, I don't know. And I know that Knights of the Old Republic remaster, which came out in the delayed replay universe, I can't remember, I think that might be an in-between thing. It might be Legends, it might be canon. So yeah, I don't know. It's I'm sure it's probably a fun game over there. But yeah, so Creature Commandos is surprisingly, the characters like Weasel have deep backstories, and there's GI Robot, all these odd characters, Agent Frankenstein, Dr. Phosphorus. So there's only 2 episodes left, and the end of the most recent one has me a bit nervous about what could happen in the next couple episodes. So I don't know, but even if it falls flat for me, like I've been enjoying most of the episodes, but even if the what ends up happening next falls flat, I'm still pumped for the new DCU. The new Superman 2025 trailer looks promising, having crypto and whatnot, really embracing the comic book angle, and it's a world that already has superheroes, so you don't have to do setup. I think that was one of the issues with the DCEU. They were focusing on setup and accelerating the setup and shoving characters into what should have been Superman's next step in his own arc and taking the focus away from him. But yeah, I think the trailer got me more excited, which was a tall order given that I'd just finished Superman and Lois, and Tyler Hoechlin is my Superman. They gave that version like a full life, and it's like really great the way that he played the character and the material that they gave him, and like the other characters and supporting cast of that show. Like it just felt so like what I love about Superman. So going back to like a younger one, um like I wasn't so sure about going to that so soon, but yeah, I'm even more excited now. And I saw that the Batman Part 2 got delayed again to October 2027, and I'm fine with the delay. I know some people are making it seem like suddenly everyone's going to lose interest and not go see this movie about this iconic character, which is really silly when we live in a world where Avatar 2 made a lot of money, even though there was a 13-year gap and people claimed that nobody would want to see it. So I'm not so worried about the Batman Part 2 not being a success. It does make me wonder, people have been pointing this out, that maybe part of the delay is due to figuring out how to fit Pattinson's Batman into the DCU instead of having a different actor playing that Batman. And look, even if it's the same actor, I'd prefer it to be a different universe, similar to how Tyler Hoechlin was in the Arrowverse and then in the Superman and Lois universe. Well, I guess technically before Arrowverse, Supergirl used to be part of a different universe that then got merged into the Arrowverse. But then Superman and Lois was its own universe. Yeah, it's a whole rabbit hole. But yeah, I think same actor or not, I want the Brave and the Bold movie to have a Batman who is a bit more experienced, more than just year two. Has had a couple of Robins maybe, and wears the blue and gray finally, and can be a Batman who can team up with some really comic booky characters like Beast Boy or Plastic Man and fight foes like Condiment King and some sunflower aliens or something, and basically feel like the Brave and the Bold animated show where he seems like he thinks the rest of the world and everyone else are ridiculous and he's the only sane man. I think that'd be a fun way to differentiate the two versions of Batman, if they do that. But yeah, I guess we'll see what happens with Batman and the DC slate. Clayface movie could be interesting. Not sure if they'll do the complete shapeshifter like Clayface or just a mask version. I'm sure there's some interesting Hollywood stuff that could go on there. It's just got to be way better than the Venom movies, like those really are like pointless basically. The new Craven movie, the people at Sony say they're not sure why these movies aren't succeeding, and it feels so out of touch, like they don't look at the internet or whatever. So I hope that that's a final nail in the coffin for those Sony villain movies, and that things are better going forward with Spider-Man related stuff. But yeah, again, like it's just a whole I guess we'll see type deal. Not really sure what to expect. Um, yeah, I think all that's pretty much my update. Still doing Yes Shift, my podcast about the band Yes, I do with my dad. That'll be back in the new year, and working on Drum Talk TV stuff. Oh, Star Trek Lower Decks ended recently. Really good finale, although parts of it did feel kind of rushed. It was kind of weird how the 2 episodes before it didn't focus on the main cast. I kind of wonder if part of that was they got the memo really late that this would be the final season. But I thought those last few episodes are still really enjoyable. Real of the vibe, the friendship vibes of those characters, and made it seem like the ending could open up possibilities for the characters. It kind of feels like the story goes on, but it could go on off screen, and this is just like showing us that they'll always be on adventures or something. But yeah, I don't know, but really enjoyed the show. Glad it got an ending, and looking forward to the Section 31 movie that's coming to Paramount Plus in the new year, and whatever other Trek comes about. So yeah, stuff to look forward to, and there's just a lot out there. But yeah, I guess that'll be it for me. And like my other self mentioned, Delayed Replay will be back sometime in the new year after a bit of a break. So stay subscribed, keep an eye out, and there will be posts on socials and whatnot, maybe out of the blue, when the next season premieres. So yeah, that's it for me. Happy holidays, happy new year, and without further delay, have a good day. Oh, one last thing. Highly recommend watching That Christmas. It's a animated movie on Netflix. It's really good, really wholesome. It's great. Yeah, just go watch That Christmas. That's my recommendation. All right. Later, everyone.